Customer development is key, and focus is key.
And that's why it's good to have in a company, it's good to have somebody who's really good at product, but then also somebody who really understands the sales, distribution, marketing side of things as well.
Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. My name is Marielle Voxep. I'm so happy to see that so many of you made it out on a wet and snowy night. So thank you very much for coming. Tonight is a very exciting event. It's one of our Meet the Entrepreneurs panels, where you'll have an opportunity to hear from successful entrepreneurs, the ones that have been there and done it, and have an opportunity to ask them questions as well. I'd like to introduce our moderator tonight, Krista Jones. Krista is a longtime supporter of Entrepreneurship 101. She has presented our sales lecture several times, and she's also moderated this panel a few times as well. Krista is the senior advisor and lead of the Education Innovation Practice, a new practice that's evolving at Mars. She's a passionate innovator and builder of technology-based businesses since 1988. She's worked in both large public companies and in startups. She's an engineer, entrepreneur, mentor, and an expert at solving ambiguous problems. She has a unique combination of strategic, technical, operational, and marketing expertise, and is known for her comprehensive knowledge of existing and emerging ICE technologies and architectures. At Mars, Krista currently leads the education cluster, an emerging sector that applies innovative technologies, advances in pedagogy, and business models to advance the global education industry. To date, Krista has personally advised over 350 startups and worked with 1,300 ventures in the ICE industries. Krista and her husband own a children's technology educational franchise that fosters early innovation and creativity in robotics, animation, digital art, and video game design. Please help me welcome Krista.
How's everybody today? I was happy you guys all showed up too, because it's kind of awkward to talk to just an online screen. To start things off, I just want to it'll help our panelists to just get a flavor for the type of entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs that are in the audience. So if you could just give a raise of hand for the different categories you're in. How many of you work in the digital media, kind of the entertainment space, the consumer-driven space? Great. How many are in the mobile apps world? Smaller group. How many are doing SaaS, kind of online business models, direct to business? Okay, great. And how many are in deep kind of software, algorithms, kind of enterprise-based initiatives? Fantastic. And the last one, we're starting to see many more of these at Mars. In fact, in our Jolt Accelerator this year, we have a hardware software combined. How many of you are doing some hardware work as well? Because that's a really interesting space. I'm going to bring our panelists up on stage now, so please join me in welcoming. I'll start with Haroon. Sorry, I have to put my glasses on because I'm old and I can't read without them. Haroon Mirza is the co-founder and CEO of CognoVision. Worked with Haroon for a long time. You're in for a real treat this evening. He's currently the Director of Business Development for the Anonymous Viewer Analytics Division at Intel Corporation. He's at Intel as that is the company that actually bought out his startup, which was an analytics startup in the digital signage and retail industries. CognoVision was named Canada's most innovative company in 2009 by the Canadian Innovation Exchange, CIX as we all know it, and was acquired by Intel in 2010. So Haroon, welcome. John Myers is our next panelist, and he's the co-founder and president of CoreFour, which is also, the product name is Edsby. Edsby is a new social learning platform that transforms how teachers, students, parents, and administrators engage with each other. Before that, John was the CEO of Centrinity, the makers of an email product called First Class, and has helped lead the sale of that business to OpenText. Prior to that, John spent many years now toiling at an obscure company that we all know and love called Nortel Networks. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce your last name right. So. To Michael, sorry, John, come on up. I meant to ask you that before when we were in the green room, so I have a terrible gift at mispronunciation. So Michael's last name is Silagadze. Did I do it okay? He's the founder of Hat Monocle, which is an education software company based here in Toronto. Tophat Monocle is changing the way classroom instruction is done on a mass scale. Prior to Tophat, Mike was an early employee at MyoVision Technologies in Waterloo, where he helped build their R&D team. He's a graduate of the University of Waterloo in electrical engineering. Come on up, Mike. Ooh, and hopefully I don't roll off the stage. So I think to get things going, I'm going to give each of the panelists a little opportunity to just tell you a little bit about the company that they're working with currently, or that they've all founded, and a little bit about themselves and their journey. So we'll just start. Maybe I'll start here with Mike, and then we'll go across just to give so you can each get to know them a little bit better.
Cool. So. Yeah, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about how Tophat got started and what we're up to these days. We're about 3.5 years old these days. We started right around after the recession and where the real estate market kind of collapsed and nobody was making any investments or starting companies, which in retrospect seemed like a pretty terrible idea to start a company at that time. But it ended up working out actually really well, because what tends to happen, if you look at some of the most successful companies that get started, they get started during recessions because nobody else is starting companies. And if you somehow manage to persevere and survive that difficult period, you end up coming out kind of the #1 in your category. Microsoft, Google, a bunch of others started the same way. It was kind of blind luck. At the time, it didn't seem very, very lucky. So what Tophat does is it provides a web-based tool that teachers can use inside and outside the classroom to engage them. Just to give you a picture of what this looks like, picture like a university classroom, like 200, 300 students. Normally, I hope there aren't too many professors in class. Normally, when the students show up and no interactive technology or anything is being used in class, the students, when they do show up, are mostly trying to stay awake, just kind of listening to somebody kind of talk at them for an hour. It generally, for most students, it's not a very effective way to learn. So what Tophat does is it allows the professors to take advantage of the students' mobile devices that they already have with them in the classroom. Instead of the students browsing Facebook on them, they participate in a variety of activities inside the classroom, like being polled by the professor, participating in discussions and competitions and tournaments, all kinds of really cool activities. They just transform the classroom from being passive, not very engaging for the students, to being a much more active environment. It raises students' grades. We've been around long enough that we've got some really great data about this now. Raises their grades, increases their satisfaction, improves the course evaluations of professors. So it really generally makes the class environment pretty awesome. These days we've got about, I guess about 150,000 students this year on our platform. About 300 universities. Most of these are in the US, but we've got Canada and some in Australia now as well. Next year we're probably going to have around 500,000 students. So growing pretty nicely. In terms of, I guess, the funding history of the company, we somehow managed to cobble together an angel round early on. It took us about, if I recall, something like 6 months to raise that round of funding, which is just brutally long. Today, it wouldn't take nearly as much time just because the environment is a lot better. That allowed us to just kind of get started and build that basic prototype and get our first few early customers. And we raised about $1.5 million total in angel funding across 3 different rounds. Then we, this was fairly recently, about 7 months ago, we were able to close a venture capital funding round. And that was with Emergence Capital and Inovia, some really big names in Canada and in the Valley. And that was an $8 million funding round. So that's allowed us to expand pretty quickly. We're up to about 70 people now. Growing pretty fast. Our magic number is about 300% a year growth, and we've been able to hit that for a couple of years. We'll see. If we keep doing it, then we'll go to infinity, right? Cool. So yeah, I guess that hopefully gives you a good summary of where we started and where we're at these days.
Great, thanks, Mike. John?
Yeah, just a little bit about me and my background. I went to U of T. I've got a degree in computer science. And when I graduated, I kind of liked living in downtown Toronto, and I was looking for a job. And there was a company called Bell Northern Research, which was a jointly owned by Bell Canada and Northern Telecom. They had a secret lab at University Ave. So I went from walking to the U of T over there to walking to University Ave over there, and it was easy to handle the change. So I started working there and actually enjoyed building systems for Nortel networks. And it was a lot of fun. We grew the team over time. At one point, we had about 400 people working in the facility there. And I went from being a programmer, when I left in 2001, I was the general manager of the lab, the business unit there. And I ran our global messaging business unit. And we built some interesting products over the time. The one we're most famous for is something called Meridian Mail. And how many people have used Meridian Mail? Do you remember voicemail? And the young people don't remember voicemail. But Meridian Mail was one of the key products that we built. And I was the design lead on that project. And I had 3 guys working for me who were really clever guys. One guy was the senior architect. There were a couple of other guys who were doing some great software. And we made a good team. And we built this product. It went on to generate about $2 billion in revenue over the next decade, of which I got nothing because I was an employee, as did the rest of our team. And that's the way it works when you're working in a big company. So somewhere along the line, the 3 guys who were working for me left and started their own company. And they used a lot of the concepts that we developed there to create a product called First Class. And I don't know, are there any First Class users in here or people who've used it? So a few hands go up there. It's kind of like Microsoft Exchange, Outlook, and SharePoint all rolled up into one package. And it was incredibly efficient, very easy to use, very scalable, and incredibly low total cost of ownership. And the place where that fit in well is with schools and school districts. Because when you think about it, school districts are incredibly large organizations. So TDSB here in Toronto, right, they've got 30,000 teachers, 240,000 students. If you threw in the parents into the equation, you've got about 600,000 people. And I think only the federal government in Canada is larger than that. And that's just one school board. So we found a real market selling this highly scalable, cost-effective communication and collaboration platform to school districts. And lo and behold, after 10 years, we had 51 of the 100 largest school districts in Canada running the product. We had 4 of the top 10 in the US and hundreds of other school boards running it. 30% of Sweden. We had all of Denmark through a federal government rollout of a SaaS-based deployment of First Class. So we did pretty well. But through it all, the one thing that kind of haunted us, we never built any specific features for education. It was just really good horizontal technology. And because we had some business customers, so people like Alaska Airlines and U-Haul ran First Class, so we couldn't really drill down deeply into education because they kept us honest. They were always worried that we were an education company. And so we told them we weren't. So eventually, we sold the company to OpenText, which is Canada's, I think now it's still Canada's largest software company. And we stayed for a few years to try to shepherd through the product and everything. But eventually, we decided it was time to go start another company. And so we thought for about a day as to what the new company should do. We considered lots of different options in social and mobile and things like that. And after a day, we said, we really know education best. We've got contacts all over the world. We have a reseller network around the world. And we know how bad the software is in school districts today. So I've got a son who's in grade 2 in TDSB. And the #1 form of communication between the school and our house is his backpack. And when he forgets to bring it home, he leaves it on a play date. My wife doesn't do the deep dive to the bottom of the backpack to pull out the crunched up paper. We don't know what's going on at school. And he went out, as many parents here will probably attest to. The kids go out back in grade 1 and they get the training on the code of silence. Right? If you ask your child, what happened at school today, they say nothing. Right? They don't tell you anything. So the parents, the kid's the most precious thing in your life, but you don't know what's going on at school. You have no idea what's going on other than 2 parent-teacher interviews a year and maybe a couple of report cards, and that's it. And so anyway, it sort of inspired us to say, we can do better here. So we decided to build, we call it now a social learning platform for school districts, but we originally started thinking about it as an education engagement system because the whole idea is to use the modern technology of the cloud and the internet and tablets and smartphones and the social metaphor and all that good stuff and use that in such a way that the teachers, the students, and the parents are all nicely engaged with each other, so that the right information flow is happening between the teacher and the student and the principal and the parents, and all those things are just happening. So we think of it as a vertical private social network is kind of the underlying technology. It's vertical because we're building stuff specifically for education. It's private because it's not open to the public, you know, the users at a school district. And it's a social network, but it's one where the social graph isn't determined by friends. You know, you don't friend your teacher. The social graph is determined by the organization, and information is shared on a need-to-know basis. So anyway, it's been an interesting ride. We've been 2.5 years now into it. We're deployed in a number of private schools in the GTA area, and we're in 4 or 5 school districts right now. We're ready to go sort of North America-wide for this coming September, and we'll be rolling out to a number of additional new school districts, including one of the 10 largest school districts in the US. So we're pretty excited about that, and we're just interested to see how the ride will go. How you know, this one will go. Will it be a $1 million business and we'll have a nice little cottage industry? Will it be a $10 million business, a $100 million business? Who knows, right? That's the fun of being an entrepreneur and not knowing what the future holds. But it is fun giving it a shot. And as I say, you'll get more than just nothing than you would if you were an employee at a big company. So it's kind of fun.
Great, thanks, John. Haroon?
So, hi everyone, my name's Haroon. So back in 2004, I graduated from Carleton University with a degree in finance. I moved to Toronto, and when I moved to Toronto, I started working at a big company, which was at the time called Cadbury. I was a senior analyst doing financial analysis. While I was doing that, I think about a year in, I started to conclude similar things to what John experienced on me. You know, I hadn't sold things worth $2 billion, but what I had seen really quickly is no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did for this company, unfortunately, you would never personally kind of benefit from it, and I started to have a philosophical issue with that. So I started thinking long and hard about, you know, what are the different paths I could potentially take in my life, and what did I want to do with my life? So there I am, kind of sitting at Cadbury. I think, you know, my philosophy of work was always to put my blood, sweat, and tears into anything. But what I noticed really quickly, one day I was working on my computer at the office, and all the lights turn off. I kind of look up, and I realized I'm the only person on the floor. I started asking myself, why am I doing this? And then I went through this existential phase where I kind of went through thinking, you know, there's this one path that I could take. I could work a couple of years, I could go do my MBA, and then come back to work, and maybe I'll be pushing 6 figures at the time, which is kind of success in the corporate environment, and kind of take that approach. But then I kind of figured something else. I said, okay, well, you know, if there's this figure, let's say, for example, 100K a year, for argument's sake, 6 figures a year is deemed to be successful. Well, what if I wanted 100K a month? What if I wanted 100K a week? If I wanted anything in that level to do whatever it is that I wanted to do in my life, I had to find another way. Okay, another way. And the only way, to me, was entrepreneurship. That's the only way where there is no limit. I don't even like the phrase, the sky's the limit. You know, there's this phrase, no limit. So back then, when I kind of embarked on this realization that maybe this entrepreneurship thing could make sense, I learned actually about Entrepreneurship 101. Just by like a random email forward by who would become my co-founder. So I enrolled as a student into Entrepreneurship 101. I was a student in around 2006, 2007, like in one of these very seats. And I kind of went through the program, and I learned about entrepreneurship. And as I started to go through it and I learned, I realized this path made a lot of sense to me. I would be in control of my destiny. I could go make things happen. Everything was up to me to ideally get out there and succeed or fail. And I was okay with it. So when I decided to quit from Cadbury in end of 2005, early 2006, I remember people telling me that, hey, Haroon, what you're doing is really risky. You know, you're taking this risk by quitting Cadbury. And I never even identified with that statement, because I always thought the bigger risk would be staying at Cadbury and forgoing my dreams, looking back at my life, wondering what if. So I actually never viewed entrepreneurship as risky, at least in my delusionally optimistic mindset. So back in 2006, I took some time off after I quit. I really reflected hard on what I wanted to do. And then me and a couple of my friends, who every time we used to hang out, we used to just brainstorm up ideas, we decided to form a company. And what a lot of people don't know is that company was CognoVision, but the name CognoVision meant intelligent vision, which really could be applied to anything. So the idea was, hey guys, the 3 of us brainstorm every time we're together. Why don't we just create an entity and we'll figure out what it does later. So this was a little bit of an atypical model. So we created an entity. We decided we're going to go into business together. And then we started brainstorming what CognoVision would be. So as we started doing that, we went through a good year of, I would say, almost like 7 different what you call now pivots. We started off with one idea, such as a website. We had, I think, 3 different kind of web companies that we tried to start, but they went nowhere. Then we started making computer games like Sudoku and very simple kind of casual games. And we tried to get distribution through places like Shoppers Drug Mart, failed. Ultimately, we learned about this notion about finding a pain point. It's so common practice today, but it wasn't back then, at least for myself. So the idea was go find a pain point that exists and build a solution for that pain. So today, this is just common sense, but back in the day, this was like earth-shattering thinking. And me and my co-founders kind of came across this idea, and the idea was there's this pain that the digital signage and retail industries face. So if you walk into a Timmy's today, like a Tim Hortons, you'll notice that they've got these digital screens, which are their menu boards. So those screens are also used in environments like Walmart or Target in the US for advertising purposes. So because they're used for advertising purposes, it's very different than the internet. On the internet, if you advertise, the advertiser will know if somebody clicked the ad, if somebody saw the ad. You get some sort of metrics to gauge whether or not something's working. But inside a physical store, if you're looking at advertising inside of screen, the advertiser doesn't even know if you're looking. They don't even understand if their advertising is working or not. So our kooky idea was, hey, we wonder, what if we built a face detection system that could detect if people are looking at the ads, could ascertain gender and age bracket, and then we can essentially start to provide the metrics that you get in the online world into the physical kind of retail world. And hey, better than that, if we knew that a group of men or a group of women within a certain age bracket were inside the store in front of a display, could we even change the advertisement on the screen so that it's catered to whoever's watching? So a group of young women could see an ad for female products or vice versa for male. So we had this idea. We quickly fleshed out a quick kind of skeleton business plan. And then the first thing we did was we went through this notion of what now you call customer development. So the idea was, let's go try to talk to customers and verify if this pain is actually real and if this is a problem worth solving. So we went out, we talked to a few companies about this pain point that we thought existed, and we got this validation that, yeah, this is in fact real, and if you had this solution, we would buy it. So that's when we kind of decided, okay, I think we're onto something. So in 2007, I think near the end of 2007, we raised our first angel round from family and friends. We got a little office, and in February of 2008, we launched our products at a trade show. Now, let's quickly digress for a moment. We did, I think, 14 trade shows in a period of about a year and a half, and I'm so proud to never have paid to ever have gone to any of these trade shows. We just paid our travel and lodge, and we were inside the biggest companies' booths, like Intel, Microsoft, like inside their booths in trade shows, which gave us some serious leverage. And you learn to do things like this when you don't have the money to be there, right? These guys would pay $1 million for a booth, and we're there, CognoVision, and people would associate serious credibility with our company just because we were inside these massive companies' booths. So anyway, I digress and come back to the fact that we launched in February of 2008. We were generating revenue, I think, within that month, which was super cool. Started hiring our kind of employees. And as our team grew, as our sales grew, I think we ended up having several hundred companies, maybe even approaching 1,000, using our product in a trial mode. Then we started converting over, and people started to buy our product, so that was really great. In 2008, in our industry, we won a number of innovation awards for excellence, which also helped us with credibility. Then in 2009, for CIX, we were ranked as Canada's most innovative company, which was, I think, very exciting for us. And there's this list called the Brandem 300, which lists the top 25 up-and-coming companies in Canada. We made that list too. So what ended up happening was we got a serious amount of exposure, and then we never ever actually sought venture capital. But ever since we got that exposure, we showed serious momentum. We won these awards. We won CIX. Venture came to us, and we never actually needed the money, which was really interesting. And that's actually how this whole Intel deal kind of came to be. So we had built a relationship with Intel's business unit through the first trade show, I think, in 2008. And then over time, we met Intel Capital. Intel actually became a customer of ours. Intel Capital kept talking to us. We kept talking to Intel Capital. And eventually, in 2010, out of nowhere, there was this, we were just trying to grow a profitable company. And this acquisition offer kind of came to the table when we were never even looking for it. So me and my co-founders, I mean, we thought we were only 2.5 years into the business from launch, and there's this kind of offer on the table to sell the company, and we wanted to, go do amazing things with it. So we thought long and hard about it, soul searched, and realized that if we were actually at Intel, we could realize our dreams, because Intel has a distribution. They have sales forces everywhere in the world. So if we could get the Intel sales force to push our product, that would become really, really interesting to see adoption. So anyway, after about a few months of negotiation in September of 2010, we were acquired by Intel. And that is kind of where I am now. I spent about 2.5 years in, still kind of helping to grow our products only under the Intel brand. So that kind of brings me to today.
Thanks, Haroon. A couple of really interesting things there. You see that Haroon never raised venture capital. John didn't raise it in the first company, thinking about it in the second company, and you're heading on an escalation trail with some venture capital in your pocket. So different models of how to grow your business and what to do, showing that no one size fits all for everybody. One of the things that maybe now that you have a good feeling for what they do, I thought maybe we'd ask a little bit more of a personal question. And maybe Haroon, I'll just quickly start with you, because you made a comment about entrepreneurship not viewing it as risky as staying in the job that you're at. What were some of the unexpected challenges that being an entrepreneur brought you?
When you're at least a first-time entrepreneur, I would say 2 challenges come to mind right off the bat. One is learning to say no. So this is really difficult. When you're an early-stage company and you're just trying to focus on like a strategy and all that, and then a customer comes to you and they're actually willing to pay you to do something that would generate revenue for you, but it's a little bit of a distraction for your company. So I think my first inclination and my team's first inclination was always to say yes to these things, but they became distractions. And every moment that we were spending on these kind of side projects, while they generated some revenue, wasn't necessarily taking us in the direction that we wanted to go. So I think one of the interesting things that I learned over there was you actually have to learn to say no. And much, much later, I saw this wonderful Steve Jobs clip about this, where he said you have to learn to focus, right? Focus is not about saying yes. Focus is about saying no. Because when you say yes to one thing, right? For example, right now, if I said yes to the speaking event, I said no to everything else on the planet. And when you frame it that way, that becomes really, really interesting. So you have to really be careful about what you say yes to and what you say no to. So I would say learning to say no to customers, very difficult. And just one other kind of learning point. It was interesting, at least in the early days of our company, when we started getting traction and our name started kind of getting out there, it was super interesting because we started getting calls from people that we thought wanted to be our customers. And this happened many, many times, but they would end up in our office, and into the call, they're pitching us, and it turned out that they were pitching for a job at our company. So it was really interesting. Like we kind of went through this process where we'd have to vet out whether or not people actually wanted to be customers or whether or not they actually wanted to somehow join as a senior executive in the startup. So that was an interesting surprise anyway, I think that we went through.
John, your challenges?
I think the challenges in general when you're starting out, I see this a lot from other companies that I've spoken to, is the money side of things. You've got a great idea, you're working really hard, you've got something wonderful planned and a vision, but how do you get the money? You need a programmer, you need a website, you need this, you need that, and you can tap into friends and family, but you can only tap so much there. We've been fortunate in our second company. I've got 3 partners, and we've got gray hair. We've been around long enough. We've got enough that the 4 of us have funded everything in our company from the first day right through now. And we're considering venture capital, but we're not sure if we're going to take any or not. But not many people have that luxury, and so I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that, and you can only tap into friends and family, probably on average 1.1 times. So, you got to make sure that you spend that currency wisely, because when you come back the second time and say, no, I know the last one was a flop, but this one's really going to fly, it's going to be harder, much harder to do that. So I think that's one of the biggest challenge points that I see out there that people have when they're starting up is how do you get that funding? And the flip side of that is make sure then when you're doing something, make sure that you're sure this is going to be successful. So the idea that you went through 7 ideas, that's fantastic because it means you threw out 6 of them, right? You had the insight to say, nah, that's a loser, that's a loser, that's a loser, until you found the one that was the winner. And I think being able to do that, make sure that you've got some insight into something, the pain point, some industry problem, something that says this is a winner. Now I'm going to go tap friends and family. Now I'm going to go do that because I'm really certain I'm onto something here. That being able to make that kind of insight and decision is probably one of the biggest challenges that I think starting initiatives have in front of them.
Great. Mike?
Yeah. So I guess it's interesting because you face different challenges at different stages in your company, both as as the person running the company and just as sort of in an existential sense with the company itself. Early on, and it's interesting to see just how many parallels there are between the stages that we went through as Tophat and CognoVision. But early on, I mean, we did the exact same thing. We started off as a mobile app development company. So the biggest challenge that we had was finding product market fit, basically figuring out what we're actually going to be doing. And we pivoted. I don't think it was quite 7 ideas for us. I think it was 4. But we pivoted very quickly over a period of a couple of months across a number of these different ideas. And the biggest thing that we did that was correct, actually, and in retrospect, I guess it's lucky that we did the right thing, was we didn't really focus, or we didn't really build too much before talking to our customers. In other words, that's the most important thing you can do once you have an idea, is to validate your assumptions by actually going out there and talking to the people that are going to be buying it, and see, get the commitment that they're actually willing to pay for the thing that you're going to build. This is a problem that engineers, especially, and me being an engineer, fall into all the time, where they'll spend sometimes years building a product without validating that they're actually customers there to acquire it. They'll talk to their mom and their uncle, and obviously they'll say, yeah, this is a great idea, keep doing it. They want to be supportive. But then when they actually come out from their basement, they realize that there's actually nobody there who wants it. They find that 3 out of the 10 assumptions they made are wrong, and therefore the whole thing is junk. So that was a huge thing that we happen to have done correctly, but that's a very important stage that pretty much any early company goes through. And if you look at again, Microsoft, Google, Research in Motion, or BlackBerry, now they're called BlackBerry, they all started off doing completely different things than what they ended up doing. Research in Motion started off doing wireless payment systems. Microsoft was doing basic compilers. So, and that was the right thing that they did is they figured out, okay, what does the market actually want, and then they pivoted pretty quickly. So that was probably the biggest early challenge that we faced. And once we figured that out, once we validated it with customers, raising money, although was very challenging, it was infinitely easier because we said, hey, look, here's people who are willing to pay us for this thing. That made us stand out from a lot of other companies that didn't have that just had an idea or a prototype. The next thing, and this is crucial, probably when you reach around the 10-person stage, maybe 10 or 15 people, because up until then, you're hiring people that you know or people well within your network. So you can pretty much do it almost at random. Not at random, I mean, you don't need to have a systematic way of hiring people because everyone that you're talking to is vetted and you know that they're going to be good. But improper hiring will absolutely kill your company. And it's the kind of skill that it's interesting because everyone thinks they're amazing at hiring. Everyone, no matter who you talk to, will tell you, oh, I can read people, I'm great at it. But statistically, if you look at how effective people are at hiring, almost everyone is terrible at it. Just absolutely horrible, sometimes worse than chance, because everyone, generally the naive process is to hire people who are really good at interviews, which generally biases you towards hiring people who are really good bullshitters. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you're surrounded by bozos, and your whole company would just go down in flames. This happens just time and time again. Tons of companies failed this way. So the second big challenge that we went through was figuring out how to hire. And especially for myself as an engineer, hiring salespeople to me was incredibly challenging because I had no clue what that process was like, what to look for, especially because you look for radically different things with really every role, but especially salespeople compared to, say, engineers or support or anything else. So figuring out a systematic methodical way of hiring. And there's tons of books on this, but just learning how to do that was critical. And then, I mean, there's tons of other things, but those are really the two big things, is figuring out product market fit and then actually learning how to grow your business. Because once you get past around that 10 to 15 person mark, you're no longer really running the business. You're running the 3 or 4 people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. And so getting a high quality set of people in your company is what really determines the success and what's allowed Tophat to really be successful.
Great, it's interesting because one of the questions I was going to ask you guys is what's harder, capital or talent? But since only one of you raised capital, I didn't think that was a fair question in terms of what it is. So the next question, and this will be the last question before I go to the audience, so if you guys can get your questions prepared, we'll hopefully have lots of time to get all of your questions in. But just to help people think about, starting a business is not something you can do on your own. So I'm interested in each of you maybe sharing what are some of the key supports that you kind of took advantage of and used in your business, and what would you recommend other people do? Is it networks of people's organizations, friends and family? Like, is it personal support? Is it professional support? What sort of supports really helped you get to where you're going? And so maybe John, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but didn't explain. But I've been fortunate that the 3 guys who worked for me back in Nortel, they're my 3 partners now. So I've been working with the same 4 guys now. We've been working together for 27, 28 years. And so we know each other, better than we know our wives, like in the sense that we've been working together longer. We've been through so many battles together. And we're fortunate enough, we've got 4 different personalities. One guy's a server guy. He loves scalability and server farms and SaaS and everything. Another guy is a user experience guy. He loves the pixels and the bits and the user experience. He just, he'll spend all day and night obsessing over that stuff. And I like to say, like, I've got the Apple guy and I've got the Google guy here, together. And then I've got our third partner. He's one of the world's best sort of evangelist guys. Loves to be on stage and present and demonstrate in front of big crowds of people, and he's great at it. And then I'm kind of the general purpose general manager, guy who can take out the garbage and stuff like that. And so the 4 of us together are very complementary, and that is a real challenge. I've talked to lots of people who are starting companies saying, I'm good at one thing, but I need other people on the team. I need a partner. How do I find a partner? And it's like saying, how do you find a wife? It's like, well, I don't know, there's websites, but it's hard. It's hard to know how you're going to make that connection. And I think having the right people there is key. And I've been fortunate that I've got a team. There's a team of us that we've been together for so long. But without that, it is a challenge. And I do talk to a lot of, I've talked to a lot of companies who say they struggle with that. And trying to hire them in, trying to hire in your right-hand man is difficult, because if he's not the right person, or woman, sorry, the right-hand person, if they're not the right person, it sets you back big time. So it's a real challenge.
Haroon, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say, with respect to you can't do it alone, I do agree with that. I would say co-founders are a tremendous help. Mentors are a tremendous help. There are organizations as well. Mars is a great one. TIE, called the Indus Entrepreneurs, is another great entrepreneur organization. And then you have to build an awesome team, A-player team, to help kind of build what it is you want to do and take it to the next level. With respect to co-founders, I've many times actually heard the analogy of co-founders or your partners are much, it's just like a marriage, and some people actually consider it something that's beyond marriage, just because of the amount of time that you spend with one another every day. So the nice thing about co-founders, one of my mentors put it really nicely. He goes, look, it's lonely at the top. When you're running a company, you can't actually be fully transparent, at least I don't think you can, to your employees when things are tough. You have to put on that brave face, be optimistic as hell, and motivate everybody through thick and thin. But behind closed doors, it's great to have somebody's shoulder to lean on, somebody to cry with, somebody to celebrate with, somebody to laugh with. It's nice to have that. And it's very difficult to do that by yourself. If you take a look at even, I think, just overall statistics over the years, while there are successful single founder-based companies, they do exist, Generally speaking, 2 or 3 co-founders, maybe a little bit more than that as well, can work great. And I think having that complementary skill set can be wonderful as well. Like for ourselves, we had a world-class technology person that could build products. He couldn't care less about dealing with customers. I played a role which was very kind of market-facing, and then we had another one of us who kind of focused on the internal operations of the business as well. So it was very complementary skill sets to building the business.
Great. Mike?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to be the third guy to say co-founder, so maybe I'll focus on something else. But it's absolutely true. I mean, really, there's 2 things that determine the success of your company for the most part, like more so than anything else, and that's the team and then the market that you're in. If you have a great team in a good, solid market, you're probably going to be successful. If you have a great team in a crappy market, you'll be successful, but in a marginal way. But if you have a mediocre team or the founders have infighting, I mean, that'll kill your company. The thing that kills most companies is founder infighting. It's really petty nonsense that embarrassingly kills most companies. The other thing I guess I would say that's helped us out a lot is mentors. In particular, the kinds of mentors that have been really helpful are people that have done it before, in the sense of actually starting and eventually selling or growing or IPO or something a company. That tends to be really helpful because there are mistakes that tons of mistakes that we made. The most dangerous ones and the ones that came close to killing the business. To go back to the hiring thing, were hiring mistakes. That's by far the worst ones. Everything else, really kind of washes out in comparison to the size of the hiring ones, because they usually take a long time to correct. So having mentors who have been there, who have done that, who can either vet people or introduce you to people to bring into your team is really crucial. That's probably been aside from the founding team, the most beneficial thing that we've gone through. And for us, most of these have been investors. I'm trying to think if there's any others that were really significant but weren't investors, and I can't think of them. So most of the, early on, I mean, most of the ones that have been really helpful to us were actually investors in our company. Because as I said, I mean, the types of mistakes you make can really, especially when you have a young company that's so fragile, it can just wipe you out. So having investors that say, no, that's a stupid idea, don't do that, can be really, really helpful. Like telling us to focus, like telling us, don't hire this guy, that kind of stuff. So.
Great. Any questions from the audience? I think we do need you to go to the mic because we have a race for the mic over here.
2 questions, one to Haroon. Last year at Mars, someone had talked about, I believe it was Instagram, 9 people, they get bought out by a big company for gazillions, pocket the money, but they end up working for the company, still doing the very thing that they are doing. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And now we're meeting somebody who creates a company, has a big company buy them out. I'm thinking, okay, now I can ask, what's it like? Did you do well when Intel purchased you? And how do you think of yourself now? Are you an Intel employee, AKA Cadbury, or are you really an entrepreneur with benefits?
Sure. I mean, so the way I look at that question is, first and foremost, even contractually speaking, typically when an M&A happens or a merger and acquisition, the entrepreneurs are bound by contract to stay on board for a few years. Typically, I've seen the range is around 3 years or so. So in that time period, you're transitioning over all your knowledge over into the big co. So that's kind of why you're there in the first place. Okay. But the other thing is that building a company, I mean, the amount of energy, the amount of time and effort that goes into this, it consumes your life. At least for myself, I did not understand what it meant, what the word balance meant. I mean, forget it. It was everything, blood, sweat, tears, single most important focus was the startup. So after a liquidity event where you're at a larger company, you actually rediscover things like a social life. You discover what it's like to, you know what, you work, it's relatively stress-free, you start taking care of your health, you reconnect with people, with your family. In my case, you meet your future spouse and get married. And these are things that just would never have happened, for me at least, during the startup days, because I was so consumed by the startup. So that's kind of my comment on that.
Okay, the other question's for Michael. Your industry. Steve Paikin of The Agenda just this past week was talking to somebody about gamification, how education is now changing where instead of the usual someone lectures and you just sit back, people are now getting into using games to educate. Is your company now banking on how the trend is now becoming popular among the media and eventually getting the average person's interest in terms of helping your business out, making it more noticeable?
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely a huge trend in education, and I think over the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a pretty radical transformation in the education space, so that it'll be almost unrecognizable, compared to what it was, let's say, 10 or really 100 years ago, because it really hasn't changed actually. And the biggest trend, I think, the buzzword for it is called flipping the classroom, and I think this is brilliant, and I think that's going to be such a hugely positive change. And what flipping the classroom means is, essentially, it recognizes that the value of just speaking and sort of transmitting information, verbally to people in an aggregate setting, is not that useful. I mean, you could do that, or rather, it's become so cheap, right? You can put up videos online that people can watch on their own time. So just coming to a central location to hear someone speak, just to gather information, it doesn't have as much value anymore. What does have value is being in the same room with a large number of other people who are learning the same content, being in the same room with a subject matter expert, so you can focus on conceptual learning, not rote memorization. That's really what the benefit of classrooms becomes. So flipping the classroom means that you record lectures, students watch them at their own pace at home. They can do it whenever they want. They can watch them several times over again. And then when you come into class, you focus on interaction. You focus on actually talking to the subject matter expert, working with your fellow students. That's what has value. And I think that's brilliant. That's essentially what it does for the most part, is changing the classrooms to the type of experience that you would have had in 10, 15 person classes, where it's all about the collaboration. That excites me, and Tophat is very much in the middle of that, because we are a tool that facilitates the flipped classroom. Because when you have 200, 300 students in the class, how do you create a collaborative learning environment? I mean, you can't. The students are basically just a member of an anonymous crowd. But with technology, now that smartphones and laptops are just so ubiquitous, you can utilize that. You can make the classroom engaging without having to go through the, financially impossible task of creating 5 or 10 person classes. So we're very much benefiting from this trend, which has only been made possible by the prevalence of these mobile devices. It's kind of cool. As soon as something becomes possible, it starts to happen. I mean, really, we started Tophat within the 6-month window when it became possible to do something like what we were doing before. I mean, before we got started, you couldn't really do it, because maybe only 50 or 60% of students had a device with them in class. And really, when it went up to 95, and today at essentially 100%, that's when it becomes possible to flip the classroom without sort of going through, as I said, that whole financially impossible thing of small classes or installing custom equipment, at every desk. So we're super excited to be working on that.
Maybe we'll go back and forth. So
I'd like to raise this question of hiring. Practically any service that you can name, and probably some that you would rather not name, can be had on a contractual basis as opposed to hiring an employee. Now, lots of companies are outsourcing things. Why would you not save yourself the trouble by not insourcing it in the first place? With the exception of whatever it is that matters to your particular business, everything else you can rent people for. You know, would you not rather do that than hire them?
Anybody want to tackle that specifically? John, you want to go?
Yeah, we certainly have, with my partners and I, we have a pretty firm opinion on that. And we do outsource, like we had pizza for lunch today and we outsourced the pizza making. But, I get a contact a week about, QA from India, and stuff like that. And we're just not believers in that. We want every key member of our team being on the same floor in the same building every day, because that's the creative environment that we work in. And we let the engineers, like they can work a day at home if they want to focus deeply on something when they're in the midst of a coding, storm. But, outsourcing anything critical, like I would never contract out a significant part of our business that needed to be done on a daily basis, because we want the team member right there. For many businesses it does work, but in software development and in software-based business, all the core aspects of that, the QA, the software development itself, the customer support, where the customer support guy can walk down the hall and say, hey, we got a problem in your software, what's going, that's invaluable. And so we build a model that leverages that. And the big thing is, a lot of people don't realize this, but in Canada, when you put shreds, when you take that into effect and the discounts you get through the government shred program, the cost of an engineer here is, it's not that much more than an engineer in India. It's certainly a lot cheaper than down in Silicon Valley. So all these startups in Silicon Valley, they need to raise a lot of money because they burn through a lot of money. But if you're doing it right, if you're prudent, if you're bringing the right skill sets and you have a core team, that's the way to do it. And then you outsource stuff that you just need occasionally done for you. Just, things like, as I say, getting a pizza.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The only kind of things that, when we outsource a few small things in the company, but the only kinds of things that you can outsource is generally very mechanical work that's very self-contained. Anything that requires any amount of thought or integration into the business, it's worse to outsource it. Any cost savings you get, you lose by the fact that you usually piss off your customers. The only large outsourcing, I don't know of any single startup company that's a smart startup company that actually outsources any significant part of their operations. When you think of outsourcing, you think of a Rogers call center, and something a lot of people here probably have experience with that. So yeah, it's generally a bad idea to outsource.
That was the core stuff I was talking about. I'm thinking about things like the accounting department, the billing, having the accountant do it, shipping, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if it's not core to your business, I don't see any issue. I think the whole argument we were making over here was the fact that it's core.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And non-essential, you could probably outsource.
Great. Question over here?
Hey guys. Great presentation so far. I'm really enjoying it. So I'm kind of like a big fan of kind of like the startup scene, and I've really kind of noticed a massive shift between two kind of philosophical sides, which is kind of building a profitable business and then going for the exit. And I know there are pros and cons of both, but I guess the best way to phrase the question is, if the financial outcome for each and every one of you was the exact same with an acquisition or with working for the company, what would be the pros and cons of each, and which one would you pick?
I guess I can. I haven't had the benefit of an exit yet, but I would say banking on an exit is sort of like banking on winning the lottery. Really, what you have to do is build a sustainable, ideally profitable business that's growing and is healthy. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be focusing on cash flows, because you could have a business that just builds a large audience that you can eventually monetize. That's much more risky, but that's still building a large, sustainable business. But that's the focus. You should focus on building the business. The acquisition should not really frame what you're doing, because that's like winning a lottery ticket. In Canada, mainly because of the funding environment, it's probably more prudent to focus on building a company that gets profitable fairly quickly. You can say that's a positive thing, in that companies that manage to succeed in Canada tend to be much, healthier from a sort of fiscal standpoint. But generally, that does result in fewer Facebooks and Googles, because those types of companies, you require massive amounts of investment before you gain profitability. So it's a different, I guess, mindset, between Canada and the Valley. But still, the focus should be, you should never need, I guess, to raise money. You should be able to either flip a switch and turn on the advertising revenue engine, so you don't need to raise cash, or just have revenues coming in so that you don't need to do it. Our process has been to, at every stage of funding, has been to sort of raise a bit of money, go into the negative, and then within a year come out into profitability, and then raise a bit of money, go into negative, and then within a year come out to profitability, and that's worked quite well for us. That's why we've been able to raise money on very favorable terms.
Yeah, I think the swinging for the fences is really, it's really un-Canadian in a way. we're too conservative for that. And I think for good purposes. Down in the Valley, the VCs, they raise an $800 million fund. It's not their money, but they have to invest it. So they're looking for people to say, well, here, you take 5, you take 5, you take 5. So these people are spending money that's not theirs. They're being given it by people that's not theirs, and they're all swinging for the fences because they want the next Instagram. And they're playing with other people's money. But up here, typically, we're playing with our own money, and we're playing with our friends and family money. And if you do have a VC from up here, they're being fairly cautious as well. And nobody wants the swing for the fences thing because most of them flame out. And so, you're absolutely, I agree, you're absolutely safest to build a real business, make sure you've got a revenue plan, figure out how you're going to monetize this thing and build it that way as if you're going to be running it for 10 years and that this is your livelihood. And if you do that, it's much more likely you'll build something of value, that will remain. Otherwise, you're kind of like, it's like you're in the music business and you're trying to do a hit song and you're hoping that suddenly you're the next, whatever, but it doesn't take off. The other thing you talked about the exit, would you rather sell and exit or run a profitable business? I think I'd rather run a profitable business for a longer period of time because that's what I like to do. But also I've got small kids and I don't want to sit around at home and have them think I play video games all day because I don't have anything to do. Running a business is, it's fun, it's interesting, and that's you've got to do something with your life. So. Yeah,
just to echo that as well. I mean, building to exit is gambling. For sure, in my eyes. If you build a successful, profitable company, as a byproduct, you might actually have the option to exit on your terms. All right? And with respect to kind of the latter part, would you either exit or kind of do the, grow a profitable business? Well, there's different ways of exiting from a business too. For example, you can retain ownership and just exit from the day-to-day operations and go do something else. That's how people build empires. Right? That's how you have these people who own 20, 30 companies. One of my mentors, their family owns 240 companies that do $6 billion a year in revenue. Right? So there's a way to at least exit from the day-to-day operations but retain ownership too. So that, in my eyes, is much more interesting than kind of just looking for dreaming of cash, right? And building something in the clouds without any fundamentals.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Great, thanks. Great question. We actually talked about that in the green room before it started.
I'm more interested in building a profitable operation. That's why I want to ask Michael and Crash about your pivots. Can you share with me your secrets about pivoting successfully? More specifically, we talk to customers, we interview them, we observe them, but we are human beings. We do have a tendency to see what we want to see and hear what we want to hear. So how do you keep focus and avoid that fallacy?
Well, for us, I mean, our pivots were so quick, I guess, that it's hard to, maybe Haroon would probably have a better story about this. For us, the first thing that we tried doing was building iPhone apps. This was the cool thing to do at the time. Everyone and their uncle was starting an iPhone app company. Some of them were even making money. But for us, we built a few of these apps, we published them, and very quickly realized that it's sort of like the real gold rush. Most of the people making money were, selling shovels for the gold rush, not people actually searching for gold. In other words, it was consulting companies that were making all the money in the app world. And we didn't want to do that. We tried that, and it was horrible. Dealing with consulting clients, just the worst thing ever. So that's the first thing that we realized, is just that we didn't want to build a service company, and the iPhone app space was just super saturated. It was very difficult to break through. So we tried a couple of different ideas. One of the ideas was, of course, Tophat. Another idea we had was just a cool technology for gaming on the iPhone, actually. And the first thing that we did in terms of customer validation is we just went out and talked to customers. And what we did was sort of our informal metric was if we talk to 10 people, do 9 of them or something like that tell us that yes, this is something they need and this is something they pay for. Really, that's the critical piece, that they're actually willing to pay for the thing. So that was our metric. Mostly, the reason you say, I say 9 out of 10 is because probably 8 of them are, bullshitting you because they just want to be nice. Everyone wants to be nice when you're meeting with them, and they think they're doing you a favor, but really they're leading you down the wrong path. So if you meet with 10 people and 2 of them tell you that they might consider and it sounds great, but they don't give you any kind of formal commitment, that's when you know that you haven't quite got that product market fit. You should find something that 9 out of 10 tell you that they're interested in.
Just to add to that as well, that 9 out of 10 thing. I mean, most recently, Steve Blank in his book 4 Steps to the Epiphany kind of talks about this customer development model. And there's a really interesting kind of aspect of it, right? Like when you have an idea and you get out there and you're trying to validate it with customers, if you ask them, hey, what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea? It is so easy to just say, yeah. Just, they want to be nice, they want to be polite, and some people have a hard time saying no. So how do you get actual feedback from a customer? And now this takes guts to do, but you ask for the order. When you ask for the order, in other words, you kind of pitch them, and if everything they're saying is yes, and even do it over a few meetings, right? The first meeting, get some feedback, go back, implement their feedback, get a few more, get the meeting going. And by the third meeting, if you're there, telling them, hey, okay, I'll deliver this to you in 3 months. Can I get a purchase order from you? Can I get a commitment from you? If at that point they say no, that's their way of saying your idea sucks, right? And in fact, using that stat, what I've heard is if you can get 3 out of 10 to give you the order, that's actually pretty good. But that's beyond just a, yes, this is a good idea. So that's another kind of angle you might want to take.
But how did you find the idea? Okay, of course, if I get money, that's really a validation. But you said that you did 7 pivots. So would you mind drawing the itinerary? How do you go from here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we used a very kind of what became a systematic brainstorming process to come up with our ideas. And even when I use the term pivot, I use it in a very general sense, in the sense that some of the ideas were true kind of pivots where they kind of sort of resembled the previous idea. But some of these things were just kind of sparks that came into our mind, and we kind of just started those too. So the process that we eventually used was essentially the 3 of us would kind of get together, and the goal originally was, okay, all of us are responsible to go brainstorm something, and we'd kind of brainstorm up ideas. And then we'd kind of pitch ideas to each other. And we'd, only if ideas that I think 2 of the 3 liked, we kind of write them down and say, okay, maybe it's worthwhile exploring. Eventually, that actually evolved to be this really cool systematic process that we used. And that was, okay, go find the pain, find out the potential market size, find out what the competitive landscape looks like, create even like a 1-page bullet point skeleton or skeletal framework of what this business could potentially look like. And that's what each one of us was responsible for. Then we kind of pitch it to each other. And I think the objective was, first of all, 2 out of the 3 at the bare minimum, ideally all of us had to be excited about it. It had to look like there in fact was a problem. It had to look like there in fact was a potential solution there. And if and only if we kind of validated the idea and it looked interesting enough to all of us, then we would go and we'd validate it with customers. Now, in our brainstorming process, what we do is this. We'd brainstorm, and between the 3 of us, here's what we'd do. We'd have literally a piece of paper or an Excel document, and we'd have 3 columns, A ideas, B ideas, and C ideas. A ideas were our rockstar ideas, B ideas were the maybes, and the C's were, okay, just forget about it. Before the end of every night, you were only to be left with A's and C's. So here's what would happen. You pitch an idea. If everybody loved it, A idea. Everybody hated it, C idea. But here's where it gets tough. I really love the idea, but my co-founders don't. They're like, no, put it as a C. I'm like, okay, we'll put it as a B for now. We'll put it as a B for now. Ultimately, you fight it out at the end and determine whether or not that B idea is in fact an A or a C. After you've gone through this A, B, or C categorization, we would only pursue customer validation for the A ideas. So that's kind of the process we used. Ultimately, you need to get feedback from customers. Now, let's say you have a B2C concept, a business-to-consumer kind of business. A wonderful idea, which I was introduced to recently, was in Tim Ferriss's book, 4-Hour Workweek. So he does what's called a smoke test. And I thought it was genius when I read it, but until I learned that, in fact, I guess it is common practice in the marketing world. So what this guy would do is, before he would start a business, he'd literally create like like for argument's sake, let's say you wanted to start a business where you're creating an ebook for, I don't know, young, let's say, young parents, first-time parents, okay? How to be a good first-time parent. That's your product. And you want to write an ebook about it. It takes a lot of time and effort to create an ebook. So what this guy would do is this. He'd kind of buy a domain name, create a landing page, and make it look like the product exists, and put testimonials there, put descriptions over there, talk about the 20 chapters that are included in this book or whatever. And then he would have like literally click here to buy now. So here's what he'd do. He'd buy some Google Ads and see how many people would actually come to that site. He'd see how many people went through the trouble of reading whatever's on the site and clicking, click next to buy. The next page would say, please enter your name and your email address. Boom. You'd click submit, and now it would say, click next to enter your credit card information. You click next, and then it would say something like, sorry, we're sold out, or give you some sort of a message, some sort of an error message. The only reason this thing even existed was to figure out, and he'd do multiple ideas all at once, to figure out how many of these smoke tests would in fact have the highest number of people coming in and converting over. Like how many people went through the trouble of not just clicking to submit their information, but were actually willing to give your credit card information. So that was a really cool idea that I had heard and I was not familiar with before that you can use to test ideas quickly and relatively cheaply.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Sorry, could I get this down?
Oh. Just try pulling it out.
Oh. Thank you. Hi, I also agree this was an excellent panel discussion, and I'm very happy to be here. The question that I have is when you guys were talking about co-founders and your team, and I just want to ask, when you're at a very early stage and you're trying to develop a product and you want to be an entrepreneur, naturally you hit up family and friends, you tell people ideas and stuff like that. I would really like some advice on how to, I don't know how to say this, but I've just had experiences where I had an idea, I was working on it, you tell a friend, it starts off as girl talk, whatever, the idea is developing, then all of a sudden, who's the owner, who's the co-founder, who's part of it, and all of that stuff. So I kind of want to get some humanizing opinions and advice on how, if you're starting an idea, you're talking to family, friends about it, at what stage do you start taking professional steps to make sure that no feelings are hurt, that there's understanding, and all of that stuff?
I guess I'll make the point, and this is almost like I guess kind of a cliche in startup circles these days, but ideas themselves really don't have a lot of value. Everyone and their uncle and their uncle's dog have great ideas, and everyone thinks they're worth $1 million. An idea in itself really isn't worth that much. So if it's at just the idea stage, it doesn't matter who owns it because it's not really worth very much. 99. It's like the old Edison quote that it's 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. So it's only worth something once you've got a company, you've got a prototype, you've got some traction. That's what makes it worthwhile. So if someone gives you a great idea and they don't do anything with it, and then you actually go out and start a business and build something, you want 100% of that. Assuming you're the only person doing it. The person who got the idea, I mean, that's worth very little, I guess, in and of itself.
Thank you. Great.
I think there's a movie about that, wasn't there? The Social Network?
Right. Yeah, that's a good example, actually. Yeah.
Hi. My question is, how do you find and select human resources for building core infrastructure? Like, I'm assuming, Haroon, when you left your job, you were a financial analyst. You didn't have any programming experience to be able to build the infrastructure of face recognition. So that applies to all of you guys. How do you find the core people, and how do you know whether you can trust them and they're not going to steal your ideas once they built it or something like that?
I guess complementary skill sets, I think what we talk about from a co-founder perspective. I can't code, okay? That's actually not entirely true. I can code a little bit. But my co-founder, I mean, he was the PhD in computer science. You could build absolutely anything under the sun. So find somebody who is great at what they do, and find a great technical co-founder to actually go build a product if you don't have the skill set yourself. With respect to stealing ideas, I think I share kind of Mike's viewpoint over here. Honestly, don't worry too much about it, because How many people do you know that would give up absolutely everything that they're doing and drop it and go put their blood, sweat, and tears into a startup just because you shared the idea? I think it's when you're starting off for the first time, a knee-jerk reaction would be, hey, I want to sign an NDA with everybody before I even share anything with them. Generally speaking, you don't need to worry about those things, right? Mm-hmm. Be open, and I've been very pleasantly surprised by that. You're open, you get some feedback. People have never tried to steal whatever it is that we're doing. But let's go back to your question about trust. Okay, that is like absolutely critical. I think there's two elements to it. So one is ideally if you have pre-existing relationships. So me and my co-founders had known each other at the time. One of them I had known for 2 decades, and one of them for I think almost 6 years when we started. So I already had this good notion of trust. But irrespective of that, always paper everything. So have a solid shareholders agreement, which just protects you if you're actually forming the corporation with one another. And a great clause, which I think everybody should really consider having, is this whole notion of vested shares in a business. So what that means is this. So let's say that you and 2 other friends come together, start a business, and you're 33% kind of owners. Well, what happens if, like a year into it, one of them just leaves? And the business starts taking off, and then the 2 of you are left putting your blood, sweat, and tears into it. Did that person really deserve a third of the company for what it is that you've done? So the notion of kind of vesting your shares, what it means is, okay, for every year that we stay, each one of us could own up to 33%, but it'll take us 4 years to own that, and every year we'll get 25% of that 33.3% that we stay with the company. And that's just kind of time-based vesting. There's a lot of different vested approaches you can do. So basically what I'm getting at over here is it's great to have trust if you've got the relationships in place, but even if you've got the relationships, paper things in a shareholders agreement and put protective mechanisms in there in the event that a founder decides to leave, in the event that there's a falling out of partnerships, and that happens all the time, make sure you're protected on paper.
Yeah, that's saved us already, so that's a data point there.
Yeah. I guess a slightly different perspective. The way that I've come at it, the way I've seen lots of other come at startups as well, is you sort of, and I'm in the tech side, software, but you're at a company, you learn the ropes, right? You start as a junior programmer out of university, you sort of get the idea of what it's like, you learn a bit more about the business, you meet friends there and colleagues, you see who's good, who isn't, and after 5, 6, 7 years, you've learned enough there that maybe you're ready to go start something on your own. And I know lots of people do startups, 21 years old, drop out of university, and we hear about those success stories, but they're atypical as well. I think the higher hit rate is when you develop the network of people, you develop the expertise, and you even understand pain points. Like, hey, I'm in this industry and I can see some pain point here. Now I'm ready to go do that. And I have some allies I can do that with, and you're taking a mature approach to that. And to me, that's a much sort of higher probability of success path than if you're just saying, I don't know, let's kick around ideas, let's go do this or that, and I don't know anybody who knows anything about that space, but it's a good idea. Well, you don't have deep domain understanding, and you don't have a network, and you don't have the team, and you can develop all of those while you're working at a company, or you move around a couple of companies, and that's how we all build friends and network and things like that. And then if you can leverage that as you think about starting your own company, it's a much higher reliability path.
Okay, thank you.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Very, very good presentation. My question is based around once you've established the idea, you've established the business, you've got the ball rolling, now it comes to going to the public, your audience. How do you ensure that you're marketing your concept correctly? Because that could get lost in all the work, research, the technical aspect of it, but you want to ensure that the core information is presented accurately. Can you walk me through that step, please?
Which one of you is a marketing guy?
All of us would be sales and marketing guys in some respect. I think a very simple and it's just a simple way of looking at it is this. Think about how you pitch your business to somebody. One thing that I've heard is if a 7-year-old or an 80-year-old could understand the pitch, you've marketed it correctly.
it depends a bit on what you're trying to market as well, who your intended audience is as well. Marketing, this is just my, it's probably the areas that I feel I'm weakest in. I'm a tech guy, I'm a product guy, and I'm used to selling because I've sold to lots of customers. But the art of marketing is still an art. And what always amazes me is how much money people can blow on marketing and get relatively nothing in return. And conversely, how little you can spend, but if you're really clever, you can get your message out to millions of people. And today, that's even easier when things go viral on YouTube and stuff like that. So it is a black art. And how do you get value for money? How do you know your strategy's right? You know it is when you're getting lots of good feedback and you're getting lots of sales and lots of hits on your website and things like that. But how do you get there? I've seen the big ticket way totally crash and burn, and I've seen the, we've got $500 to spend, and we were totally successful. So in the early days of our first startup, one of the things was at a trade show, having customers, existing customers, mob the booth, saying, hey, I want to talk to you about the next round of the software and everything. Well, that's fun, but they're not going to buy anything. You want prospects instead. So the deal was we got a whole bunch of T-shirts in and said, I'll tell you what, wear the T-shirt tomorrow, and we're going to have a special private session for all you guys. And the T-shirt was, I love first class. And so next thing you know, there are 200 people at the trade show running around with these T-shirts on saying, I love first class. The best marketing done for a pittance there. So yeah, it is still an art, and I don't profess to understand it. I don't think very many people do, but it is a challenge.
I guess the only thing I can add to it, it totally depends on what kind of marketing and what the product and target audience is, but it's just being very metrics driven. Don't dump huge amounts of money into something without having some validation that it's actually working, and have very clear, measurable, objective ways of determining if did that marketing strategy work, did that not work. That's really pretty critical.
There's also free marketing. Like for example, if there's an industry publication or an industry website, go write a guest article, go write a guest piece, become the expert that they go to whenever they want to learn about your industry. There's interesting ways of getting that kind of free press, if you will, by plugging into editors in your space.
So one of the things you all spent a lot of time talking about the importance of customer feedback and product development. It's just as important in marketing, because the one thing a lot of tech-based startups do wrong is that they market features as opposed to customer value. So I think you have to take your same learnings from product development that you guys spent quite a bit of time tonight talking about, and apply it to your marketing development as well. Think about it from their perspective, not yours. You're not marketing what you do, you're marketing what they want. So I think that's an important piece that ties into what you guys spent a lot of time talking about, which was listening to your customers.
Yeah. Thank you. And the question is, if you have any tips when you present your product to your customers. So from one side, you have to get the feedback, since the work is not done yet. And from the other side, this could be the concern, the loss. You can lose the idea. So that's like, how you keep the idea and getting the feedback from the other side. So do you have any tips?
Sorry, I guess is the question, how do you keep your customer from
how you can,
idea?
You control. You have to get the feedback from your customer, and from the same time you shouldn't lose your idea, right? So since the customer is working with your competitors from the other side.
If your idea is any good, generally you have to shove it down people's throats anyway. So I guess a couple of people have already said that really just it's not something you should worry about. Is people stealing your idea? People have their own priorities and things they work on. Nobody has time to work on your idea. That's just generally not a concern that should enter your mind.
Yeah, I agree. You hear that a lot, and it's the execution, and so I wouldn't worry about you share your idea with the customer. The feedback you'll get is much more valuable than the risk that somehow they may do something with your idea.
So I think this is the last question. You guys have been great.
All right, thank you for sharing your experience with us. My question is, when do you go and reach out to VC capitalists? Is there a point where you sort of ran out of your friend's money and you decide, I need to raise more money? Or it fluctuates, so if it hits the cusp, then you decide, okay, I will need more to grow my business?
Well, I guess the usual path is friends and family, angel investment, VC money. You can sometimes short-circuit it if you have a track record. Like sometimes you can go straight to VCs if you've already built a couple companies and sold them and made money for VCs before. That's unless you have a crazy bubble kind of market like you had in the late 90s. That's the only way you can raise money on a PowerPoint deck. It's just saying, hey, we've got this great, awesome product we're going to build, give us millions of dollars. The only time that happens is if you've got a track record. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, you need to have validation. Generally for VCs, that means either tons and tons of users or a decent amount of revenue. Every VC has different thresholds for what they look for. There's seed stage guys that invest, 1 or 2 million, and they'll be excited if you have tens of thousands of dollars a month in revenues. There are others that won't talk to you until you have millions a month in revenues. So it really varies. The VC community is pretty diverse, but generally you need to have a product, users, revenue traction, or lots of user growth.
Not only that, start the discussion early. It can take several months to raise financing, and even for example, we dealt with venture capital even though we did not take venture capital money. So what I found was if you just keep them posted, build some relationships with them, show them that you're progressing, that you're generating traction. You might be too early right now, but I think you should have a product in the market for sure. But as you're giving them updates, it demonstrates that your team is able to create value, you're growing, you've got some momentum going, and then eventually when it does come time for you to raise, it's a warm door that you're knocking on.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We're doing the same thing right now. We don't need money right now. We're not sure if we'll ever need money. We're kind of hopeful that we don't because it's a lot easier if you don't. But we wrestle with the challenge of, what the money does, and it does lots of things, of course, but we're wrestling with the challenge of we could take some money and use that to step on the gas pedal. Now that we have the product and the validation done, investing in sales and marketing and building out your support organization in advance of the customers coming on board is kind of nice, and it can get you on a different trajectory than if you just do it organically. Our last startup, we did it organically. We didn't take a dime of money, and we only invested profits back into the company. And we had a killer technology that was clearly superior than anything in the market, but we never hit the gas pedal at the right time. So we built it to be a $20 million a year business, and which is great, but it could have been 10 times bigger, but we never hit the gas pedal. So now we're doing similar to what you did. We're planting seeds with VCs. We're telling them who we are. We're showing them our game plan. We're going to demonstrate to them the traction that we're gaining so that if a year from now we decide we really could use some money, we really want to go after this in a big way, they know us, they trust us, they've seen our plan, they've seen us execute the plan, they see the traction happening, and now it's a lot easier to have that conversation. So the last thing to do is, the worst thing in the world is to try to raise money when you're desperate for it, because they smell it, and it's hard, because they sort of see, oh, you're this close to death's door. Well, why am I going to give you some money to give you an extra 3 months of life? So yeah, start the conversation early when you don't need it, and it makes it easier if you do need it down the road.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll allow the one last question.
Thank you so much. Good evening, gentlemen. I just had a quick question. If you could go back and advise your former and younger entrepreneur yourself, or maybe like a lesson or two, what would you tell yourself? Maybe it's something to be cautious of, or I don't know.
Okay, that's a good one. Customer development is key, and focus is key. Those would be two very high-level lessons at a very early kind of age. I would have loved to have known more about that. And just to also tack on to that, I think being a voracious reader, so that you learn all the time, what that allows you to also do. This is kind of me talking to my younger self. What that would allow you to do is to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? What Sir Isaac Newton said was, if I have seen further than those before me, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants today are the entrepreneurs that have written books, blogs, everything that is out there, so that you don't have to learn to reinvent the wheel. You should not be discovering the customer development process because it has existed for many years now.
Yeah. I think a couple things that spring to mind for me. I do recall the time in my career, maybe 7 years into it, where this idea of distribution, it was like, aha, that's important. I saw tech companies who had some really good technology, but they they had no distribution. They hadn't figured that out. They didn't have a channel to market. They just had some really good technology. And so they didn't go anywhere. And so that being a product guy, you don't think about that right off the bat. But do you have a direct sales force, or if not, who are you going to ally with? If you're a small company, you do need friends. You need to figure out which big companies you're going to, whose ecosystems you'll join, and how you'll get to marketplace, and who else is in those ecosystems, and what you need to do to be the best there. And there's a lot of complexity there that you really need to think out. And it's all related back to the monetization strategy. How are we going to make money as a company here? But it isn't all about just having a good product. You really need to think through the distribution, sales side of things, and how you're going to do that as well. And that's why it's good to have in a company. It's good to have somebody who's really good at product, but then also somebody who really understands the sales, distribution, marketing side of things as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the other side of the coin. I would say one of the most important things that we did, and it's the thing that we still do, is really focusing on having just a fantastic product that serves a customer need. I think if you have that, then everything else is at least accessible to you. In other words, you can start worrying about distribution and sales and all these other things. But if you have a junk product, or you built something that doesn't quite serve the needs of the customers, then there's really very little you can do, or you can, at best, get some short-term rewards. So early on, especially, in the first, year or so of the company, once you validated the customers actually need what you're going to build, and you understand what that need is, and then just sort of put all your energy into building just a fantastic product, the best thing that they've ever seen, something that that's not available anywhere else. And then at least you can have the other problems that are out there.
But just to add to that as well, right? There's this notion of minimum viable product when you're starting off, I think, which is really important. So I think eventually, yes, you do want to build the best product, but at the same time, you don't need the best product when you launch. You need a minimum viable product. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I would argue you definitely need to bring the customers into the loop to make sure that as you're building the product, you're gathering feedback to make sure you don't go off on wild goose chase. But I would say the way to build a minimum viable product is to pick a niche, something that's really small, and just have a core bit of utility that it provides that's better than anything else. At that core bit of utility. It could be the smallest, narrowest thing that you can imagine, but it has to have one amazing bit of utility that nobody else can provide. Because if you build something that's sort of mediocre at everything, at a number of things, then there's very little you can do with that. So definitely continually get customer feedback rather than kind of going off on and building something big and substantial. But you have to have an amazing thing that provides that core bit of utility.
Thank you. That was actually a great closing question. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in my closing remarks, because I think that was sort of along the lines of a great way to close. I want to thank the three of you for coming here this evening and sharing your stories. I know now we're heading into a networking event, and I think some of us will hang around for a little bit and maybe answer any one-on-one questions that you have.
I just wanted to thank you as well. Krista, thank you for leading such an engaging discussion. Haroon, John, and Michael, thank you for joining us and sharing your stories and insights. I think we're all leaving tonight with some really valuable advice. And we would love for everyone to join us in the lower concourse for a networking reception. We just ask that if you have questions for our panelists, please wait until they get outside so that they can join the reception as well. Thank you.